This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Methodify by Delvinia. Get real-world customer feedback in hours, not weeks. Schedule your demo and get a free $20 Amazon gift card. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast and Methodify it today. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 588, Bindle Stiff. For Monday, April 13th, 2020, it's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Advertiser boycotts have been an effective tool for combating misinformation in the news. But have they also led brands to avoid supporting all news programming? And if so, what needs to happen to find a middle ground? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, the struggle to mount a virtual upfront week, better meeting consumer needs during crisis, the coronavirus's impact on B2B marketing, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with a host of the Wendi Cooper Show, a show I recently got to be on, direct response expert Ms. Wendi Cooper. Wendi, hi, how are you?
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back. Now, also joining us, we have the author of View from the Cheap Seats and Killer Executions in Scrub Decks, freelance writer, Mr. Dan Goldgeier. Those are two books. I just realized I blended them together and made it sound like it was one long title.
That's okay. I'm not the book champion on this show. That's Joe's, but it's good to be back.
And next, speaking of Joe, he's the author of 5 books, including his latest, Built to Suck, the Admiral of Innovation Consultancy, the HMS Beagle, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Hi, Joe.
Hi, and I forgot to actually give you my new title, which is, in addition to all of that, the host of Corona TV, which I'll tell you about at the end of the show.
Awesome. Yeah, you have been doing that quite religiously, so we'll look forward to that plug. And finally, he has a storied history in both film and advertising and is now a partner at the Bindle Stiff Brothers. Mr. Steve Wax is here. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Cool.
Well, we've got a lot to cover here, and I wanted to start off with an article that has nothing to do with coronavirus. I read an article this past week that challenged the conventional wisdom that advertiser boycotts of questionable news sites, we won't name names, and questionable news networks, again, not naming names, is a good tactic. While partisan news can definitely be a problem, the net result is advertisers are responding by not supporting any news networks or important news topics that carry any risk of controversy. Now, this is obviously unintended, Steve. Is this a call for boycotters to back off or for advertisers to put on their big boy pants? I mean, when you hear that advertisers are pulling back from all controversy and all news because they get boycotted once or twice, you gotta wonder, is this the advertiser's fault or the boycotter's fault that, all news is being affected in negative ways in terms of their ad revenue?
I did a bit of reading around this and could find very little data to support that article. I think it's in some ways a past issue, actually. Was interesting. Can you hear me fine, Bob?
I can hear you fine, yes.
Okay. It was interesting. One of the comments, I read the comments. Well, first of all, the publication, that Real Clear Politics, is quite a conservative publication of its
Oh
own. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty
There's no doubt that this is in response to liberal boycotts of conservative news sources. You know, and it's
right.
just like, and yeah, but I thought the article was well reasoned and not too much in terms of being off the deep end in terms of the opinion being expressed.
No,
And
absolutely,
right.
absolutely. And it was refreshing to read a sort of responsible conservative article criticizing probably everybody who's on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
It actually was. I'm not being sarcastic. Anyway, in one of the comments, the guy said, "This reminds me of the boycott against Domino's Pizza, undertaken because the then CEO was pro-life. The slogan was, buy a pizza in a Domino's box, put a woman in a pine box." And then the guy goes on to say, well, the prospect of getting a cheap meal with red sauce and burying somebody too, all for $5, was irresistible. Sales soared. So, which brings up the issue of the effectiveness of boycotts, number one, because a lot of times the backfire against boycotts turns out to support, the conservative or liberal advertiser, mostly conservatives, have actually benefited from a lot of them. And secondly, it gets into the whole issue of fake news, people trying to fight back against what they see, people on the progressive side see as kind of distortion of the truth, starting with the President of the United States, who is an admitted liar to some extent, he's kind of proud of it. And so it gets into political issues to me more than any real, and debates about free speech more than it does about any evidence of a strong push one way or the other.
Yeah, but there's no doubt that news is suffering for a lot of reasons. I mean, in terms of revenue, it's been suffering for quite some time, and there is no doubt that when you have a time like coronavirus happening right now, I told you this had nothing to do with coronavirus, and here we are talking about it.
But you got back into it.
You got back into it. But we've reported on this show, we've talked about on this show in the past that a lot of advertisers were putting coronavirus as a no-go zone for advertising. I mean, anytime there's a controversial subject or dealing with the news, that's political in orientation or whatever, I mean, it's like brands are avoiding those topics. And when you have a heavy controversy going on, or you have a very heavy political dialogue happening in the news, you find a lot of advertisers not getting involved in that particular situation. Yeah, but that goes
to a different topic that I think you're going to deal with, it, which is about caution among advertisers to appear to be surfing on the back of the coronavirus and everybody stuck at home. And I think that's an interesting one too. What I like about this one is, for me, it raises something I've wondered about for a long time, which is the contrary to what the article is trying to say. I thought the article raised some good free speech issues. There are free speech issues about trying to shut down Breitbart, which apparently 90% of the boycott, the effectiveness of the boycott has been 90% of advertising diminution, if you will. But the interesting thing to me is why the conservatives have captured some of their own internal media, particularly around Fox News, but talk radio, since, I don't know, I think Rush Limbaugh started in 1988. And ever since then, there's been this flow that people on the coast kind of ignored, talking to working people about race, stirring up racial prejudice and all sorts of other prejudices that then climaxed in the victory of Donald Trump, who, seized on all the same issues and same tactics. And why the left, coming out of the 60s, the radicalness of the 60s, could never launch any kind of counter-programming, really, other than the mainstream media being slightly progressive, like the New York Times, the Atlantic, whatever. And I think that issue, which is a much larger concern for people who are of progressive bent, why they don't control what is a very powerful dialogue, like the counter-racism dialogue on our side, particularly at this time, is a much more important issue for citizens and advertisers. And I don't think advertisers are particularly worried about boycotts at this point. I think they're much more concerned about their bottom line and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is an unusual time for this subject to come up. I mean, obviously, everybody's suffering from the economic hardships that are being brought about by quarantine. So that's kind of depressing the ad market to begin with. But Joe, I mean, when you look at this story, what's your impression of it? I mean, do you find that boycotters should continue to be as aggressive as they have been, or should boycotters show a little bit more restraint? Or is this entirely on the brands to, like I said, put on the big boy pants and stand firm based on the fact that they're supporting, good programming that is hitting the market that they're trying to reach?
I mean, first of all, brands shouldn't put on pants because these days nobody wears pants anymore. So that's the first thing. But what brands really need to do is they need to grow a spine and a backbone, because brands have just become so wishy-washy, and they stand for nothing. And as the old saying goes, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. And I see this non-committal aspect as being so pervasive amongst brands today, as trying to just coexist in the middle, to be bland, to be completely vanilla. Now, if you take a step back for a second, I managed to escape out of the house today, and I went for a run. I started listening to the Trevor Noah interview on Howard Stern, and I just thought it was quite brilliant, and something that just caught my my mind was the fact that Trevor was saying, look, let's just be clear about something. CNN and Fox News, they're not news outlets. They're all about opinion. There's no news coming out of there. There's no journalism coming out of either of any of them right now. He said, when I grew up, journalism was bland and it was boring and it was all about facts. There was nothing exciting about it. And so right now we've seen certainly Fox News bear some of the brunt, and maybe justifiably so, because of some of the controversy coming out of some of these ridiculous talk show hosts, predominantly on Fox News. So much so that they've become the butt of jokes on parodies like SNL. But certainly, I don't think it's fair just to be able to, to say it's the brands that are to blame. It's Fox News that's to blame. It's all of them. At the end of the day, they're all complicit bedfellows for as long as it takes, and as long as things work. And when they don't, suddenly kind of the truth is laid bare, and they're all left wanting. And so, whilst Fox News and other outlets might have been the brunt of this through special interest groups or whatever the case may be, is CNN really that far behind? Number one. And number two, going back to your question, from a brand standpoint, you just don't see a brand with spine anymore. Well, there's only one brand that has spine, and we're going to be talking about them right at the end of the show.
Yeah, but I think, Bob, and Joseph, you have to look at the fact that kind of go deeper, because I think CNN and MSNBC benefited enormously from the Trump presidency and the racial outrage, and so what they tapped into successfully, which the left hasn't in the past, or the progressive, is anger. They found that they could get a very large audience, make a lot of money off anger. Advertisers are completely separate from that. Under capitalism, the advertisers simply advertise on the shows that have the biggest audience, and when they get to be too far to the fringe, like Breitbart did, they'll pull out. But I think that advertisers are irrelevant to the discussion, because they're never going to step in and do anything other than support climate change or soft issues like that Joseph's talking about, first responders, all sorts of feel-good stuff. But when it comes to the anger quotient, which is what's driving media on all sides, and what Fox capitalized on, Trump is now capitalizing on, it's a whole different battle that they're going to stay out of no matter what. If I were them, I would.
So you say that brands should stay out of advertising?
Oh, absolutely. No, just for their own self-interest. I don't have a policy problem with them getting involved. Patagonia is pretty, progressive and outspoken about a lot of sustainability issues and outdoor issues. But I think that brands mostly, for their own good, should stay out of the public discussion of the controversial issues.
I'd love to have Wendi weigh in on this at this point. Wendi, what are your thoughts here? I mean, it's just like, is a pullback a necessity for every brand? If they're exposed to a lot of risk, is the natural reaction to pull back, and is that a wise reaction? And is it a prudent reaction on the part of the brands?
Yeah. I think it's a difficult, I think there's a lot of questions in that one question. I know that, I don't think a brand ever, like when you're buying media, right? So we're talking about scheduling your media, buying your media, doing all of this stuff. And maybe some people will buy on CNN. They're not buying, I don't think they're buying media on CNN or ad space on CNN or Fox because they believe in what they're talking about. I think they're, like you said, it's about the audience. And I think it's rare. I'm not sure, but and I was going to bring up the point later on about what is actually airing in and on CNN and on the different news channels right now, which is mostly direct response stuff, or we're with you all the way on the coronavirus. We're here for you. But I don't think that brands actually, really. They're not there to support what the content of that newscast is. And if it is, that's a confusing message. And I don't think the person at home, which is who matters, is the viewer at home, is really thinking, because I just saw a Home Depot commercial and I didn't agree with what somebody just said on the news, that Home Depot is supporting what that guy just said on the news. I'm not really getting it from
The only one I can think of, Wendi, is the Nike controversy started with the Colin Kaepernick commercials.
Right.
That was an example of a brand whose, internal mantra is athletic excellence, and based itself on the adoration for a lot of progressive and radical athletes. And in some Colin Kaepernick, a lot of people harbor a lot of anger that the owners won't hire him. And so that sort of worked. But I can't think of another case where anybody's come out strongly, maybe Chick-fil-A. Yeah.
Why would anybody do that? Why would any brand do that? Say, oh, let's go create a commercial that basically we're going to make a statement, unless it's something that they're all doing for COVID-19, right? For the essential workers and things like that.
Or first responders.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So.
Which is different. I mean, Bob's question is different. He's talking about boycotts rather than, advocacy ads from brands. But it's sort of one and the same.
It's one and the same when it comes to media planning and things like that. Yeah.
I think the way it used to work, right, which was that it was exactly what I think Steve was saying, which is, it was all about the eyeballs and all about the reach and all about the media buy. And then what would happen is, and it happened on both sides, is the host would say a dumb thing, because that's what we do as humans. We from time to time say dumb things. And then there'd be a huge backlash, and the advertisers would pull out one by one until there was some kind of mea culpa or some kind of apology. And then they would come limping or crawling back in, like the pond scum that they are. And that's how it used to be. And I think, there is a clear argument to be able to say, hey, listen, this is just advertising, right? We're not attached to the content at all. We're attached to the eyeballs. But now there's a lot of blurring going on, first and foremost. And the second thing is, right now, trying to be objective about this, we've seen, the conservative media suffer a little bit more, and probably justifiably so. But how long until the powers that be, i.e. the president, issues boycotts for advertisers now that are supporting the other networks, and tells his base to shop elsewhere and otherwise? So it's become, as we would say in the old country, a bit of a sticky wicket.
Which old
Well-
country would that be?
Yeah, the old country.
The old
But
country.
the one thing we're ignoring here, maybe, and maybe it's my fault, is the Me Too movement, which has shut down Miramax, which was a media outlet. It has to do with internal controversies and violations of morality there, as opposed to what they're publishing. But Fox News, when Ailes was kicked out, was the same sort of thing. It didn't hurt them that much, but
Yeah, but
sure it didn't help them.
that's a different situation entirely. I mean, when you're talking about the Me Too movement, it's not the same as boycotting for content. It's like boycotting for content makes advertisers nervous. Boycotting because they have a sexual harassment scandal, going on internally. If the
But
company is handling,
it
it reflected
the content of on Fox. It reflected a lot of the content.
right. But it feels like it's a little bit different in terms of
Yeah,
that.
I agree.
Dan, you've been trying.
Points of view.
Dan's been trying to get in. I've heard him.
Oh, that's okay. It's a very interesting discussion, but I think this goes back to a basic problem that, back in the old days, advertisers had a lot more control over where their message ran, and they took a lot more interest in the content when this was back in the old network days. And now that you have, we're talking about a couple of different things. We're talking about a handful of cable networks that seem to get run a different political spectrum, but then we've got like thousands of websites that people are placing ads on, whether it's programmatic or deliberate or what. But advertisers have given up control of where their message is. And how hard is it to say we don't mind if our ad or message runs near newsworthy events like coronavirus, as long as they run on a certain quality of media sites? If you care about quality, then choose the sites that you want to be on, and choose the ones that you don't want to be on.
Well, good advice.
There's one other aspect of it, which is, I don't know if anybody ever read the New York Times piece about the free speech issues around the YouTube algorithm. Have you discussed that on this program, Bob?
No, I have not.
Well, a young guy who was fairly conservative wrote a book after he went deeper and deeper into right-wing, activism and fascism, and came back and said what drove me to it was the adjacency algorithm of YouTube. The more I watched, right-wing, conservative, racist talk on YouTube,
Oh yeah,
the more it served up to me.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that story. Yes.
Yeah, we had a bunch of us got into a big argument, bunch of publishers and other people on a Zoom call, by the way, about whether that was throttling back that algorithm was a free speech issue, because a lot of people were saying people shouldn't be advertising on YouTube, given this effect it's having on the young people in politics.
It's fascinating.
It's a whole other
stuff.
issue, but you get into all sorts of question marks, as somebody said earlier, around this stuff.
I think you have to separate things into television advertising, what we call television advertising, okay? and then digital, right? So, which is basically programmatic, and it's very hard to control, and it's all bidding, and it's this and it's that. That's very different than going and buying, your flights for the year or whatever, and you know exactly where your campaigns are going to run, and you're really doing your media planning for television, for whether it's cable or it's network or whatever. There's still a lot of TV that runs, and that's kind of, what I'm thinking when you say the news. I'm not really even thinking about the complicated world of programmatic, where it's just, I don't even know if it's a human being doing it, which is probably not.
It's not.
And then being able to pull it and manage it and everything. It's just a mess.
And
so.
that's a perfect segue into our next topic, which will be about the upfronts. The virtual upfronts keep getting they keep getting postponed because, go figure, the networks can't agree on a week to have it. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Methodify by Delvinia. And I want to give you another chance to get a $20 Amazon gift card just for checking them out. Now, this is no strings attached. You can get this card just for checking them out. Now, if you've been listening to the show for the last month or so, we have been discussing COVID-19 and how it is affecting the marketing and advertising industry, as well as the people involved in it, and consumers. Don't want to forget consumers. You may have seen that there was a story a few weeks back about McDonald's releasing an ad in Brazil that separated the arches for social distancing, and the majority of people seeing it felt that it was completely inappropriate. Everyone is a little on edge. People are scared. Brands are scared. And behind every brand are real people like you making these decisions, and you're probably scared. You don't know what's going on. Nobody wants to offend their consumers. This is where our sponsor, Methodify by Delvinia, can help, because Methodify collects real feedback from your actual customers on concepts or creative before you release it into the world. And the whole process takes hours, not days. Methodify gives insight professionals and senior marketing people the information they need to power better decisions that will protect their brand and themselves in this whole new world that we're facing. Now, just a few weekends ago, Methodify was used to test digital creative for another fast food chain, not the one mentioned above, to make sure the messaging wasn't tone deaf. It was invaluable information for them, and Methodify can do the same thing for you. Actual customer feedback is a game changer, because in times like these, brands that wait and see are going to wind up making costly mistakes. Now, connect with your customers, sure. Build relationships, build trust, build fans, do it all, but test everything. And Methodify can get you started today. To find out more about Methodify and to set up a demo, just Methodify it. Literally, Methodify it. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast. That's methodify.it/BeanCast. And as a way of saying thanks, every BeanCast listener who signs up and completes a demo will receive a $20 Amazon gift card just for your time. And heaven knows, I've been saying this, we have all a lot of time on our hands. So again, that address is methodify.it/BeanCast. And we thank them very much for their support of our program. Well, the proposed virtual upfront week has collapsed because of the inability of media companies to coordinate amongst themselves, which begs the question, Wendi, are we thinking too analog about this? And if so, how do we fix it? What is the holdup, really? I mean, we can talk about the infighting and nobody can agree, but what is the real holdup here on this?
Well, the the last time I was on your show, I had an upfront question, Bob.
Okay.
Sorry. And now this is the follow-up. It's kind of funny. They need to just call it the back offs, for as far as I'm concerned. It's like, where do you go from here? Nobody knows what the future is holding, right? And the upfronts are
Nobody
kind
even
of,
knows what programming is going to be out, because it's just like a lot of the
that's
programming
right.
has been put on hold. The
That
production's put on hold.
that's right. So they're kind of living in this dark space, not really this vortex of, we're all living in it. So I mean, the reality is how can anyone project anything and come up with anything, because nobody knows anything about anything right now. So
Right.
that's kind of a given. But the what's interesting is that if you watch television, this is like a direct response dream. I want to add wet dream. Sorry, Bob, it's not a bad word. It's not a curse word.
No, it's okay. Completely fine.
Right? Because there's so much media available and people are dumping so much media that this is what direct response thrives on. Do you wonder why you see that freaking My Pillow guy everywhere? And the Medicare commercial that runs, now you have Medicare. That thing runs like 30 seconds,
Snap.
4 times back to back to back. That when you hear that and see that and you see all this, I'm going to seal that hole, and all this is like, I'm telling you, they're making tons of money because they're buying really, really cheap, dumped more than remnant, great media for a song. And so that's who the winners here are as far as this is concerned. As far as the upfronts are concerned, who knows? I have to tell you, I don't feel sorry for any of them. I think what they're going to learn from this is that hiding in the suite upstairs, having the private meeting with the drinks and the this and the that goes on, right? And doing those deals of buying these big tranches of media for the year, I think that that's just not going to happen anymore. I really don't think
Do you
that's
really
going to happen.
believe that this is going to have that kind of impact? I mean, I can see it maybe shifting a little bit and maybe evolving a little bit and become a lot more digital in the way that they approach things. But I'm still skeptical that this is going to be the end of the upfront as we know it.
But TV, you go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, TV scheduling is year round now.
Right.
Programs premiere all year round. So the upfronts, the more we talk about them and year after year we discuss them, they sound like a ritual that doesn't need to happen anymore.
That's right. And I totally agree with that. And wouldn't it be funny to watch television advertising all of a sudden become the new programmatic advertising? Because that's what kind of has to happen.
Television is becoming more and more programmatic. I mean, especially because of the streaming networks. I mean, it's just like the streaming
that's
of
with streaming. Yeah.
Well, but we're talking about streaming of first run content. We're talking like what happens with NBC programming. It goes to Hulu, and then that's immediately subjected to programmatic insertion, dynamic insertion of ads, and it might as well.
Is that part of what's included when you go to an upfront? When you go to the upfronts and you're negotiating
Yeah,
the thing, it's just all kind of one big package. Am I right?
It's usually a package, but when you're talking about the dynamic insertions on most of the content coming through, I mean, it's just like not all of it is part of the package. Some of it's just being inserted because of
because nobody else wants to buy it.
Right.
I think Wendi really nailed it across the board, and I think there are a couple of things going on here. One is there is this corporate cultural shift happening right now. You had Cannes being cancelled, obviously because of the coronavirus, but so many of these events have this aura or this reputation of being opulent, over the top, the sweets, as you said, the caviar, the champagne, etc. The world has changed, and what the event represented. I mean, there was the content and the context, and I think the context of it is changing. And from a content standpoint, maybe the reason why these media companies are not playing nicely amongst themselves is because they're all scrambling. They're all in poop right now, and everything associated from programming itself, right? I mean, how are they filming some of these shows? How is the funding changing? All of the economics and the dynamics that underpin this market is shifting, and I just wonder whether it's about kind of a high stakes game of chicken here, which is who's going to blink first. Who really is kind of purporting to have a much stronger position when in actual fact the house that they've built is a house of cards.
Well,
so
let me get back to my original question though, which is the trouble of putting on a virtual upfront more about analog thinking? Meaning, it's just like, are we thinking about trying to stage virtually what we did in the physical world instead of reimagining it as a digital experience? Who needs to see Jimmy Kimmel get up on a Zoom call with all your buyers to do his stand-up? I mean, it's like the incessant need for everybody to do a stand-up monologue at the beginning of their late night program, when that doesn't work anymore. Why, not in this context? Why don't we just change that? Why do we have to think analog in the way that we're doing it? And why not just adjust the content to fit the medium that it's being expressed
I think
in?
that's what they're doing.
Yeah, were you not listening to a word we said, Mr. Norton?
Yeah, I was going to say.
No, but you know what? Even when I wrote Life After the 30-Second Spot, I mean, I remember writing this book back in 2004 and talking about this ridiculous thing called the upfront. Nothing about it made sense. In a world that, I mean, certainly I could see, and many people on this call were involved with digital, understood digital at that point. I remember when I met Steve all the way back when, we saw how the world was shifting, how it was shifting from linear to nonlinear, how it was shifting from analog to digital. And the fact that these bunch of so-called media professionals could come together, in this room and plan ahead for the entire year and be so, smart about predicting the way the world was going to unfold in the coming year was ridiculous then, and it's even more ridiculous now. I think the difference now is that it's redundant and it's irrelevant now. That's all.
Yeah, but Joe, sometimes, especially the world that I come from, in direct response agencies are out there to scoop up all the stuff they can that is kind of left over from the upfronts, right? And and that's really to me what the upfronts were about. It's more about the media agencies going in and buying as much stuff as they can so they can resell it to their clients, which are the brands. It's not so much the actual network selling to the brands. It's them selling to the media
And
agencies.
that's at the heart of my argument, was the fact that it's like, I understand everybody's talking about it needs to go digital, and I'm agreeing with that, and they need to evolve it. But the fact is, there's still that need to sell a chunk of advertising
Yes.
dollars to the holding companies, who are then going to resell it out
Right.
to their clients. And so that needs to happen still, but the process of getting there is what I'm talking about changing. It's just like we're struggling over this upfront week that we're trying to mount to try to replicate the offline experience online. Why not just reimagine the entire thing and stop this process? You can still get your deals done the same old way for as long as that's going to
On a Zoom
last.
call.
Right.
Hell,
Why not
yeah.
do it like that? Why do we
Well,
need this dog and
that's the
pony
parallel
show?
with the con thing cancellation, is that nobody wants to give up their champagne and their rosé and their caviar.
Yeah.
You want to reimagine it? Yeah, go ahead. But people want that special treatment,
Right.
especially media buyers.
And that special treatment has always been like at conventions that then also have marketplaces. The marketplaces where the deal is done, the upfront where Jimmy Kimmel gets upfront, is just to draw people in.
Right.
I also thought, and this is me perhaps going off subject slightly, but I seem to have established that path. I thought that Quibi was an upfront. I thought, well, Quibi, there's all these new shows. Hey, look, what's coming, And I don't know if advertisers are looking at that. They raised, Katzenberg and Meg raised 1.7 billion for it. And they're looking at saying, that's sort of a replacement. It's a big sales pitch for it. It's amazing they just came out with all that content,
You'll have to check it out. I have no idea
Oh
what
yeah,
Quibi
you should
is.
check. Oh, it's this short film app. Everything's under 10 minutes.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Well-
it was an entire network that was built for people on the go, and it launched right in the middle of the coronavirus quarantine. So there's no use case for it.
Worst timing ever.
I'm not convinced. They, it is true that we're living in the Zoom culture right now, but they were very. There's a lot of articles about they were very aggressive about coming out now despite it. And I can't remember the argument because it was pretty twisted probably, but a lot of people I know are talking about it and looking at it just because it's different. It's like it tries to cater to the mobile culture when you're at home, sure, but there's something really fascinating about short content.
Well,
I
we
love
got
short content.
well, we got
And it's
to
all star driven.
we
there's
got to
so
move
many
on. We got
star
to
directors and star actors in it that it's amazing.
move on and take on the next topic. There were several interesting articles this week about consumers' needs during crises. According to a Canadian study, many consumers feel that advertising should be paused during the epidemic. Not really sure about that study. Didn't get to really delve into it at all. But while some experts out there are suggesting that advertisers just need to aim for lower on Maslow's hierarchy of needs list and stop going for aspirational needs and just focus on the everyday needs of people right now. Dan, what do you see as striking the right balance here? What are your thoughts on this? These series of articles?
Well, right now, I think there are too many so-called experts. They're speaking in generalities. And you have to take this on a brand-by-brand basis. Some brands, depending on what they make or what they sell, have been able to reasonably adjust, while others are going out of business or fading. And there's an Australian marketing professor named Mark Ritson, and he had a webinar last week. And basically, he put brands into one of three categories: flex, fix, and freeze. In other words, brands that can easily adjust to what's going on right now, brands that just need a little tweaking and do what's going on right now, and then brands that have to freeze their marketing because they're just out of the conversation, let's say an airline cruise ships, whatever. So, the idea that advertising in general should be paused is a silly one. I don't know. I didn't see that I couldn't delve into that study like you said. But the world is still trying to conduct business. Advertising is still a part of that. If you have a brand that has something tangible to offer right now, you can make it easy for customers to access, whether it's a digitally related product or something that can be delivered or picked up easily. That's the message you need to have right now. Now,
before I forget, I want to make sure
Yeah.
you send me a link to that Ritson article because that sounds really interesting. I'd love to put that in the show notes.
Yeah, there's an article, and there's also he went on for an hour webinar where he just delved into a lot of this. It was very interesting because he's a classic marketer. He's not necessarily an ad guy. But let's talk about this idea of the hierarchy of needs. For some time now, advertising as an industry has been promoting the idea that even the most mundane brands, bleach, cookies, shaving cream, it all leads to some sort of higher self-actualization. This is kind of what I consider this talk about brand purpose. And it always sounds like, to me, it sounds like a lot of nonsense. And so now, if you're going to come back and you're going to say in this uncertain time, you need to abandon that idea, even temporarily, you expose it as more nonsense. Lexus has a campaign right out now where they talk about not being in the car business. They're in the people business. It's a commercial. You can look it up, and I think that's even worse than staying the course. Because at some point brands will get the all clear sign, and they're going to want to revert back to this higher self-actualization brand purpose nonsense, and it'll seem even more silly than ever. So what I go back to is my friend George Tannenbaum. He's a blogger and a writer in New York, and what he suggests advertising should do ideally is impart useful information in an executionally brilliant way, and I'm all for that. And I hope we'll see a back to basics. I don't think the advertising industry's trending that way.
This is so perfect. I have to say thank you for saying that, because
You're welcome.
nothing gets me than watching a commercial on television and they are talking. There's a graphic that comes up and it basically is saying, do this, do that. This will save your life. This, that, the whole COVID, this is what you need to do. We're here for you. And it's all freaking graphic. There's no voiceover. There's no real sound design besides the calm commercial that makes me even crazier with the rain thing. But it's just the stupidest freaking commercial I've ever seen in my life. But the commercials that are just graphic driven, like people are really going to be looking at the screen reading that, I mean, it's so execution and creativity and execution and all of that stuff. Yes, it's very, very, very important in these times.
So I have a lot to say about this topic, and I actually got so irritated today that I went and recorded a 4-minute rant that was just filled with so many expletives that cannot be repeated in the show. And I had to basically in advance warn my entire family that there'd be a lot of F-bombs coming from my studio, aka my home office. And then I showed it to my wife and she said, great, lose all the swear words and cut it down by about 85%. And I've done that. I've got it now down to 1:15, and I'm going to probably release it over the next couple of days. But actually, the message was shut the hell up. Just be quiet. For once, brands, just be quiet. Stop talking. Stop.
So, Joe,
talking.
you're saying stop talking. I'm saying talk if you're going to put words up on the screen.
I'm saying what I'm saying is there's a continuum, and I'll just talk about it briefly. Number one, first of all, let's recognize that brands are in a very, very difficult, precarious situation. It is a consummate, catch-22. If they just sell and they continue with the same messaging, they're going to get dinged. If they turn or change their messaging and say, the top of the Maslow's hierarchy, we're all in this together, we've got your backs, we're people helping people, they're going to get dinged. The problem, of course, is that if you switch your television on and you look at any advertising pod, you're going to get 8 messages all saying the same damn thing. Kumbaya, kumbaya, we're going to get through this together. And we don't need a can of soda to tell us we're going to get through this together. We need each other to get us through this. So I think the message comes down to, well, what else do you do? If you're damned for trying to sell, and if you're damned for trying to help, what do you do? Well, the third thing you could do is donate that airtime to like the ad council or to people that really have a message or a story to tell. And the fourth thing is just do nothing, just stop, pause for a moment, just pause for a moment. Now, I'm aware, I've looked at all the studies as well, and I've studied it as well, and I've taught it as well, which is that companies that advertise during a recession almost always will benefit from doing so when we come out. But this
And
is not a recession. It's going to be a recession or depression, but right now this is a crisis. And that's why my message is, look, very simply, if you've got nothing to say, don't say anything.
Well, that's the key here. If you don't have anything to say, I agree. Don't say anything. But
Well, when
commerce
you
is
do,
going
but
on.
Bob, when you do
Commerce.
have, my point is when you do have something to say, and it is important, say it the right way.
Right,
Say it so that it can be
that's
heard.
exactly what I was going to get
Yeah,
to. I mean, it's
yeah.
just like I completely agree with you. Commerce continues. I mean, even though this is a crisis, it's a very unusual crisis in that commerce continues. We continue to buy stuff. We continue to need to buy stuff, and we continue to have relationships with brands. And you don't have to have your COVID-19 special presentation to sell a can of Coke. And not that Coke's doing that, but I mean, it's just like Coke is something that people still drink and they want to drink it. Water is still something that people drink. The bottled water. I mean, it's just like there's food, retail. A lot of
Don't you
these.
think
yeah.
people want normal? We want
Right.
normal. I was watching Meet the Press, by the way, Bob. I was watching Meet the Press this morning, and every single commercial, every single one was the same message about the essential workers and the first responders and the medical people, how they're thanking them. Every single commercial, it seemed like, and that's NBC, that's national television.
Yeah, those shows, they get the big corporate image spots, So right now it's the Walmart singing thank you and Google singing thank you
Yeah,
and
but what are they going to be saying next week? What are they
Yeah.
going to be saying next week?
What do you guys think about the idea of brands doing things, say the way Red Bull traditionally did, rather than advertising, moving to, and Ty Montague wrote a book called Story Doing, which is a series of examples of brands sort of swearing off advertising and taking action.
I'm so against this. I mean, it's
But let me finish before you attack.
I know where you're going
No,
with
I'm
it,
going
but
somewhere. So I saw something. I think it was. It felt a little self-serving, but I saw Mark Zuckerberg on with Governor Newsom, and I think Facebook had donated $100 million in medical supplies, and even though it was a Facebook Live piece, surprisingly, even though it was in a sense him advertising on his own platform, he was at least doing something. It's putting a hell of a lot of money, not for him, but for the rest of us, into what was a substantial cause related to the virus. And I thought that was interesting.
For me, I look at this and this idea of we don't need advertising anymore. We should all be like Red Bull. And I always get so upset when I hear that. I mean, it's just like not every brand has the ability to be like Red
That's right.
Bull. Not every brand has that much personality, but also that much
Money.
well, no, not that much brand enthusiasm. You know what I mean?
And
Like
Red Bull has done a ton of advertising since time immemorial.
Well,
And
right.
No, I'm
still
talking
does.
about right now in response to the crisis we're in right now. I'm saying because everybody's saying it's inappropriate. I agree with you completely about those ads on wherever they're on Meet the Press being and other places that are even
But
less
making
appropriate.
yourself a content network at this particular time, that's a very pull strategy, and it's just
Yeah.
how do you get people to even want to seek you out in this time? You need to have advertising. You need to be making sure you're saying things are normal. We're going to continue to make your life as normal as possible, and this is part of the process. We're going to sell you stuff, and you're going to buy it, and you're going to feel happy about it.
Yeah,
And
if you've
it's-
got a way to get it to people right now, yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a fine balance. You have to be extremely empathetic to the situation, but we're all in the same situation, right? So it's not
Right.
too hard to figure out that there's a time where we don't need. I think we're going to spend a period of time thanking people And then we're going to slowly get back to normal, but not as slowly as you might think, where the advertising then, they'll shift. Look at how quickly, right? They shifted the way the commercials, what they said in their commercials, right? So they really, every brand came up with what we talked about a few weeks ago, Bob, where they just kind of took existing footage and put a new message to it, or took footage of the first responders and the medical workers and all of that stuff, and everybody kind of got creative and sent the message out, but that message can't last forever, and you have to get back to what everyone is calling the new normal, and
Oh
advertisers
God,
have
if I
to
hear
do
that
that
one
as
more
well.
time, the new normal. I'm so over that phrase. I
I
was over
know,
that
I know,
before
that's why I
this.
went.
Hey, I want to get to the last topic real quick. We're running out of time. So with all the focus on consumer marketing challenges, and that's what we've been doing for most of the show, B2B challenges get largely ignored in the process. So Joe, just real quick, how should the B2B space be weathering these times?
Well, I looked at some of the source articles, and I think there are a couple things. One is, if the consumer tagline, in this crisis is "we're all in this together," well, then the B2B one is this idea of helping is the new selling. And so, first and foremost, people may not be buying right now, but as the article says, they are learning, and there is the opportunity to help and build that relationship during these uncertain times. Now, there are certain categories that are going to continue to do very well during and post. For example, collaboration software, especially in light of people working from home, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, for the most part, there are going to be some things that are going to change. But I've always actually, believed that, and I've said this throughout my entire career, that we always tend to to your point, Bob, we always tend to focus on B2C and ignore B2B. But B2B has always been primed for every single thing that we talk about, from digital to social to mobile to virtual, to even the startup culture. B2B is a prime market to take advantage of these channels and platforms, and even benefit from some of these technologies in terms of leveling the playing field. So, I think it's an important discussion. I know we're discussing it right at the end, and we're almost out of time. But I think, my advice here would be, look, there isn't an industry that isn't going to be affected and isn't going to have its challenges. But for the most part, I think B2B has a toolbox and an arsenal of techniques, from selling, from the sell side to the actual adoption side, that is just perfect to take advantage of. And maybe that, is what B2B companies should be doing right now, is going back to school and learning how to, everything from the power of video to what was it, SlideShare, and and how to create thought leadership and white papers and distribute them. And as I said, on the sell side, and then on the buy side, some some cells are going to be cast to the side, and others are going to be uplifted. But that's just the circle of life.
Well, this has been a phenomenal show. Thank you, guys. You made it a wonderful experience this week. I think we got to a lot of good places, but it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Wendi Cooper. You can find her at wendicooper.com. That's the home of all things Wendi, including her show, and you can find more about C-Spot Run there and all the other stuff she's doing. Tell us what's going on in your world, Wendi. What would you like to promote?
Well, what's going on in my world is just basically about what's going on in everybody else's world right now. But it's kind of awesome for me, because I am stepping back and I am taking time to create a lot of things, which is what I love to do. But I also am moving more strongly, and I've talked about it before on the show, into the voice first world, and doing voice creative and sonic branding and original music and sonic logos for people. So I discovered that my skill set as a producer and a marketer over the years, the only thing that stops me from really kicking ass in the voice space is the fact that I'm not working with picture, which is awesome. I don't have to work with picture. So anybody that's a producer and listening out there, when you get to work in the audio space alone and do marketing and stuff only with audio, it's awesome. I am in love with it. So anyway, that's what I'm focusing on. And you can find everything about me at Wendi with an I, Wendi Cooper.com. And by the way, you do have to put in www.wendicooper.com.
Well, next up, we've got Dan Goldgeier. You can find him at dangoldgeier.com. I'm not going to try to spell it for you right now. You just go to the website, go to my website. I'll have a link to it. But tell us what's going on in your world, Dan. What would you like to promote?
Absolutely. I can, if you, I have capacity to help you with copywriting and strategy to get you through this crisis, or even think about what comes after this crisis blows over. Hopefully it does blow over. And if you can't hire me right now, the least you could do is buy one of my books, like Killer Executions and Scrub Decks, an outside the box look at obnoxious advertising and marketing jargon. It's available on Amazon. So yes, it is contactless delivery to your house, and all proceeds from the sale of my books go to feed my dog.
Fantastic.
And even that's not enough.
No.
Now, next we have Joe Jaffe. You can find him at the hmsbeagle.com. That's the home of his consultancy that he runs with Lynn Power. Tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What would you like to promote?
So, as I said at the start, when all of this hit the fan, I went to Facebook Live and I started streaming every day at 2 p.m. Well, I just started it and I just picked an arbitrary time. And every single day, in fact, almost without fail, I've done it every single day for the last month. I took a break for Easter and for Passover, but other than that, I've been going every day. I branded it. I called it Corona TV. I have guests on the show. In fact, Bob, you're going to be on the show next month. I'm fully booked for April. I've really put my heart and soul into it with a very simple goal of trying to help as many people as I can. And it's given me energy. It's given me purpose. I have no idea what will become of it, but I know that I will continue doing it post all of this. So for anybody that actually wants to see that, in fact, I do have a face for radio or don't have a face for radio, you can judge. I sing sometimes, I serenade, I do some pretty crazy things, but it's every day, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find it through my Facebook page, or otherwise just go to coronatv.show. And I would love to hang out with all the BeanCast listeners every day, 2 p.m.
And last but not least, we have Steve Wax. You can find him at, Bindle Staff. I'm not sure what's your website, but Bindle Stiff. Bindle Stiff. Tell us what is the website? Is it Bindle Stiff or is it Bindle Stiff Brothers?
We don't believe in websites. We don't have one.
No, okay.
But you can reach me at stevewax@gmail.com.
Okay,
Put a period
fantastic.
in or not, doesn't matter. What we're doing is a lot of strategy, digital strategy and message testing for brands, and we're working with another video company that is differentiated from Zoom right now. And but my passion also, besides my work, is a couple of nonprofits I'm on the board of. I'm the board chair of Heyday Books, which is a fabulous book publisher nonprofit in Berkeley that publishes everything from the California Field Atlas, which is a great watercolor guide, fat watercolor guide to California fauna and birds and such. And but they also publish like Foucault in California, about when the great French philosopher dropped acid and went out into the desert, and a book about People's Park, and on and on and on and on. So they're at heydaybooks.com. You can order right now, despite the fact that Amazon is throttling back books, you can still order through them. And I suggest you go there.
Awesome. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can even find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, the fair. Now, Dan, we've talked about the Steakums Twitter account before on the show. I'm absolutely sure about it. And it's been a great account for a long time. But in the age of Corona, it has become a just godsend of just rational wisdom. And it's unbelievable that this brand that is basically fake, like, what do you call it? Just frozen slabs of meat that are even highly processed meat. It's not even
Very
like real
processed,
steak.
yeah. I looked it up on Wikipedia and it's gross.
And yet somehow it's become this voice of wisdom and reason that's, phenomenal for the brand. I mean, it's just like, there's no doubt about it. It's helping the brand to lift up their reputation in the eyes of consumers.
Yeah, I think it's the incongruity of it. The fact that, there's a guy behind it and he's very smart. But if he, as himself, he's got his own Twitter account, if he posted all of this, nobody would care. I think we like the fact that it's coming from some random, and it is kind of a random Twitter account like Steakum. And I think advertising and marketing people are especially attracted to a lowbrow product that they'd never buy.
Yeah, I mean, he even mentioned it. He called out the irony that it's just like, if a random person had said this, you wouldn't listen to it. But the irony is that Steakum says it and you're all listening to it. It is kind of an ironic situation there. But, well, the fail for this week is Australian celebrity chef Pete Evans, Wendi, is claiming that $15,000 biocharger devices that he's selling on his website could kill the coronavirus. Obviously, the Standards Authority in Australia is investigating him. There's a lot of backlash over these claims. Why do people, I mean, I know why people come up with, these get rich quick schemes, because they want to get rich quick. But
yeah, well, I mean, okay, so we're not in Australia. I tried to do some kind of like backstory on this guy to see what was the real story on this guy. So, but the only Twitter that I went to, because I'm really not that active on Twitter or whatever, but the only Twitter I went to was the Medical Association's one that actually posted the thing in the article, I think that you posted. And everybody like hates this guy. I mean, they hate this guy. Yeah, he should not, after the coronavirus is gone, he should not go out in public because he had a lot of haters. But I watched the video, and I don't know, Bob, if there was an extended version of this video, but he never said that it was going to cure the coronavirus. He just said that there was, he had 1,000 recipes on his website, and one of them was for the coronavirus.
He didn't say it would cure the coronavirus, or didn't say it would cure COVID-19. What he said was it would kill the virus, meaning on surfaces. So, I mean, it's just like, in that, with that claim, that's bad enough. I mean, he's not saying it's a cure.
Well, if it had 90% or 60% or whatever the alcohol content is to kill the virus, then.
But did he claim? Wasn't he selling it for $15,000?
Yes, he was.
So doesn't this a stunt more than a get rich scheme?
It's a terrible stunt if it was.
Wait, hold on. He wasn't selling it. He was selling it, I think, this was my takeaway, okay? My takeaway is he was selling it for the recipes, the thousands of recipes that he had on his website, and that thing, whatever it was, the $15,000 thing, had something to do with these recipes. Am I on a different planet?
I have one question. Is he a character on Tiger King?
Man, every episode
in Australia, this guy is like a chef that everybody knows.
No, but he's a minority stakeholder in Steakum, so.
Oh, no. Allegedly. Don't get me in trouble. Okay, now
the time-honored tradition of advertising snake oil. If you go back to the early days of advertising, it cured everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's get to the foul for the week. In the age of coronavirus, much of the ad tech world is being exposed for not being tech at all, but rather being media resellers. A lot of the programmatic ad tech world has claimed that they're offering some kind of technology solution to advertising. But as we pull back the veil and we expose the guts of these companies because of the fact that so many companies are pulling back their media spend, we're finding out that they're just media resellers. And when they don't have media to sell, they're not really offering any kind of solution. So, Steve, this situation is it's just in a lot of ways ugly, but it's probably really, really good for this sector to have a cleaning of house to get to the real technology solutions and sort out the media resellers and get them out of the picture.
Absolutely. No. Look,
There you go.
There's some of us on this call who are more involved in creative and digital production and such that scratch our head when it comes to some of the more complex media platforms and resellers and programmatic, et cetera.
Yeah.
We had comments earlier. I think Wendi said that. I agree with her. I'm fascinated still 2 years out by peer-to-peer relationships between brands and customers, which is sort of what this is trending towards, trying to be more transparent. And I suppose it's a reaction to, all the disclosure statements we get now, trying to be more honest. And I was on a committee, as you know, for a long time with the IAB, a creative digital committee, and we could never figure this stuff out, even though that organization is the standard bearer for this. So it's a dividing line in the marketing business between the people who pay attention to this and the people who produce, advertising and content. And I don't know, maybe Joseph has something to say about it, but I find it healthy that it's headed the way it is, but I'm not sure I completely understand it.
Absolutely.
And I do own some stock in the trading desk, which is quite an interesting play.
Well, I appreciate everybody's thoughts on this. Have a suggestion for this list out there or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly.